Welcome along to the second Sustainable Sheep Systems webinar of Series 5, which is proudly funded by the Farm Advisory Service. My name's Hazel Lawton, I'm from SAC Consulting and I'll be your chair. So tonight we are on part 2 of this 3-part series. So last month we kicked off with part 1 of Your Farm's Greatest Asset, and we heard from Michael Blanche, who introduced the series by highlighting the importance of value in our time within sheep systems. And tonight we are going to talk more about measuring your time to identify where savings could be made and make labour more efficient. So tonight we're looking at simplifying the system. So tonight, what are you going to learn? So we're going to find out how SRUC's Kirkton farm identified and reduced labour demands through lambing time. You're going to find out what tools are available to help you measure labour on farm, and you're going to find out what technology advances are available to help reduce labour. So that's been a quick introduction there, but I'm delighted to introduce Dr Claire Morgan-Davies, who is a researcher at SRUC's Kirkton Hill and Mountain Research Farm. Claire specialises in sheep systems, and she's been involved in so many projects that we wouldn't have time to list them all, but a couple that are definitely worth mentioning, which she'll also talk about tonight, are the smart tech and tech care projects. So they obviously involve technology, and they've been basically international farmers, specialists and abattoirs all coming together to look at technology advances in the sheep sector. So Claire's got a wealth of knowledge in this area. So without further ado, Claire, I would like to introduce you and hand over to you to take us through the next part of this evening.
So, as Hazel was saying, tonight I will try to tell you a little bit more about the research we've done around labor and labor efficiency on sheep farm. So, as you can see, here's a lovely picture of Kirkton on a good day. It's not always like that, but it's just to remind you the sort of environment we're dealing with, and keep that in mind when I will tell you about what we've been doing for the past probably 10 years. So, um, so just a little outline of what I will cover tonight. First of all, just talk briefly about labor on sheep farm in general, and then really spend more time on how we can measure labor. And I will go over a series of projects we've had in the past, and some of them might be a bit complicated, but I think it's really to show you how easy it is to just kind of benchmark yourself. So we'll go through that. And then the second part of the talk is really to show you, as Hazel was saying, some tools and digital tools that can help you for labor efficiency on your farm. So hopefully that will give you some ideas and some yeah, ideas for the future. And then we'll conclude on that. So if we think of labor on sheep farm, as Hazel was saying, the labor is the largest expense of all the on the post. If you think of your farm, roughly 35% is based around labor. And lambing, as Hazel was saying, is probably the most intense use of labor, especially for sheep. But it's not just lambing, and there are other tasks. So it's a bit difficult to really try to itemize everything that's happening. So how do we estimate the labor on the sheep farm? Do you look at standard labor requirement, which is the kind of government official way of looking at how many labor you've got? Do you look at hours per animal per year? It's quite difficult. And as I was saying, there is many tasks involved. So how do we try to grab and understand what's happening on the farm? So how can we measure it, really? And when should we measure it? Because sheep farming is very seasonal. So what I will try to cover a little bit now is some of the research we've done at Kirkton, and that's going back probably 10 years now, work that was funded by DEFRA and Iranet at the time, and also the Scottish government. So the first part I want to share with you is some work we've done around lambing time specifically. And we were working with 3 outdoor farms. They were not in Scotland, these ones, they were down in England, but the issues are the same. And following on that, we did more work at Kirkton this time, and we used also farm in the rest of Scotland and in Ireland. And I will show you some of the results we got for that, and hopefully you'll find that interesting. So that first labor project was looking specifically specifically at lambing time on free farm. And we had 3 different type of assignment. We were looking at labor in the lambing field, so when the ewe were lambing. Then labor once in the field where the lambed ewes are, so once they are with their lamb. And then the last task we were looking at was all the other things you're doing. So for example, in the shed. So that's the 3 kind of part we were looking in that first little project. So we were using a classification of tasks. We had 15 main tasks like feeding, looking, opening gate, driving, etc. And this classification comes from some work that a PhD student had done at SRUC in 2009 when she was following some sheep farmer during lambing time, and she was trying to classify all the different tasks that are being done. So we were using the same kind of classification that she had found at the time. And how did we do it? Well, we had a very hands-on approach. We used GoPro because they were quite cheap, so it was easy to have several. And also, it gives you a nice idea, fisheye view of what you can get, and you can carry it on yourself. So we strapped this GoPro on the free farmers, on these free farms, and they were carrying it on sample days. And once we had these videos, we were just looking through them and try to classify minute by minute the type of action they were doing based on that classification. So were they driving, were they opening a gate, were they lambing a ewe, etc., etc. So really trying to, it was quite intensive work, but it was really trying to see exactly what was happening at lambing. We also use something, we use Endomondo, but I think nowadays there is app on phone like Strava, etc., which shows you where you're going. And that was helpful to kind of track during the day where the farmer was going, and also the distance. And if you're interested, you can see how many calories you've burned and how many burger you can eat after that. But so that was quite an interesting thing. Again, a tool that's quite easy to find and not really very scientific, but quite accessible for many farmers. And this is what we found. So this first pie chart is really to show you on the lambing field what sort of activities were happening. And you can see that mostly it was driving around and opening and closing gates. And the rest of the time was dealing with the ewe or dealing with the lamb. But it was quite striking seeing that the driving and opening gate was was more than 50% of the time on a sample day. When we showed that to the free farmer, they were quite astonished to see how much time was spent not dealing with animal really and doing something else. When we looked at the lambed ewe field, it was the same thing, driving around and walking this time, which again might explain because walking was easier to just check on both the ewe and the lamb. And spending time with the animal was a bit less as well. But again, a huge proportion of time spent driving around. And that would be the Land Rover or the Kubota or the quad bike. So it was just driving in general. And there is a little bit of other things, talking 5%. So that's good. And the other tasks, which were more things that they were doing when they were not in the lamb field or the lambing field, was probably more in the shed. So again, driving around was quite a big percentage, but spending a lot of time with the lamb and the ewe. And again, if you think it's things that you're doing once you're in the shed, it could be dealing with lambs that you had to bring inside, so you have to feed them with a tube, etc., or just attending some ewes that maybe are not exactly in top performance. So it was just a very simple little project, and again, just looking at that was already quite an eye-opener for the farmer who were involved. And when we looked at the time, so that was just a kind of a graph to represent the time spent with the lamb in particular, to just see if there were differences between the different farms. And you can see that there is a huge difference in what farmers are doing. So for they spend more time bottle feeding compared to farm. or farm 2 was spending more time tagging the lamb. But you can see at the bottom all the tasks that went under dealing with the lamb. So it could be tagging, catching, preparing bottle, etc. So it was really trying to itemize exactly everything that was happening on this diversity in practices in these farms. What we also what we also looked at was looking at the spatial dimension. So using that Endomondo app, for farm 1, we were just tracking them on one day, and they were doing roughly 25 miles on that day. That was for 6 hours of recording on the app, and you can see that there is a lot of going and backwards and forwards. So again, that's interesting to look at and maybe help you to see where you're going. Is there any way that you could maybe rationalize your daily distance? And it was even, I would say, more obvious for farm 3, which did 30 miles per day on average for that particular example, and that was 10 hours of recording on the app. So you can see that clearly they spend a lot of time around the steading, just probably checking some of their lamb. But in that case, they are different field away from the main farm, and you can see the amount of time they were spending on road, just trying to go from one place to another. And even looking at that for them was quite useful because, again, you might rethink your system when you see it on an app or in front of you rather than just in your head. So that was that first kind of a little project we did, and based on that we decided to just go a bit further and do things on a larger scale at Kirkton. So we decided to look for the rest of the year, not just lambing, and maybe have a bit more of a variety, not just outdoor system. So what we did at Kirkton, and that was also some work that was funded by Iranet and for a project called SUSCHEP at the time, so back in 2017. So we still use the GoPro, but this time we were trying to find out exactly which period was interesting to record. We can't record 365 days. It's just ridiculous because there are some days that when there is not, I mean, there is some work, but maybe not as much as some other time. So we were trying to pinpoint the main activities on a sheep year. So mating, post-mating, pregnancy scanning, pre-lambing, lambing, marking, shearing, weaning. So we were trying to target these time. And we did a questionnaire before with our farm staff and with the farmer involved in that SUSCHEP project, trying to find out when at this specific time, how much labor they were using, how many people were there, if it was important for them, did they handle the sheep at that time or not, trying to find out what they were doing, but really on a rough, kind of very broad way. And then after that, we picked up some sample days during that sheep year, roughly 10 or 12 days, when we put GoPro on the farmer or the shepherd, just to see exactly what was happening on these times. What we also did for our farm staff at Kirkton is we put the GoPro, and every time they were doing some handling in the fank, we were also recording with a system called Pocket Observer, trying to see exactly what sort of tasks they were doing. So it was a bit more detailed at Kirkton because we could pester our shepherd a bit more to do what we wanted to do. So there was a lot of walking around with GoPro and trying to just see what was going on. So we use the same classification. Instead of 15 tasks, we reduced it to 13, but still the main kind of tasks were there. And I've got some example in the next slide. And we also had the subtask. And when we finished that, we were able to have some farm profile to show the amount of hours for this specific task at time of the year. And you will see some example later on. So for example, at marking, the sort of task we were looking at is how long does it take to gather, to worm, ear notch, castrate or vaccinate the lamb? Do you use automatically EID tag or Weather U, or did we do it manually? Did we condition the score? Did we condition score the use, and how long did it take? Did we vaccinate? put the food bath, dose the ewes, or fecal count the lamb. So for each of these tasks, we were trying to measure and see how many minutes, how many seconds it would take. So we ended up with a very, very big table for each of the various times. So at scanning, all the activities you do, and how long roughly it took for one sheep to do these sorts of work. And then that allow us to be able to scale up and be able to compare what was happening. So as I say, we were using the software, but we were using it on a Scion. So we were able to be in the FANC while the staff was doing the work and be able to record, as well as looking at all the videos that we collected from the commercial farmer. And then again, go through all of them and measure the time for each of the tasks. I would say we had many students helping us doing that. It was quite a long process. So what kind of flock were we looking at? So at Kirkton, we were looking at just our normal flock, but we expanded in these other flock as well. So we were trying to compare what happened if you use technology, so precision livestock farming or EID system, for example, like the EID wake rate we've got at Kirkton here on the picture, and we had system in the UK and in Ireland. We were also looking at the impact of having prolific or non-prolific breed, and that was more for that specific project, farm that were in Ireland. So does the labor change if you've got lots of lamb compared to not many lamb? So again, trying to put some number in that. And finally, what happened if you try to go with or without high genetic gain? And in that case was, do you record your lamb at birth, which is something we're doing at Kirkton. So we are able to calculate their genetic value like EBVs. So again, that takes a bit more time, and you can see the sort of recording we're doing on the farm at lambing time. So we were looking through all these different systems, and in the next few slides will show you some of the results of what we found doing that. So first of all, when we did the questionnaire and looking at the labor profile in general, when we're asking what do you do, here we've got the comparison between the Irish, Norwegian and UK farms. So that was for the SRUC project. You can see that there are tasks that all farmers always do, and that seems entirely logical. Everybody does pre-mating, winter feeding, lambing, marking, etc. But some tasks like the sale or post-weaning or mid-pregnancy checking or post-mating are not done necessarily by all the farms. So even that was interesting to see the kind of variety between the way farmer handles their animal. They were all sheep farmers, they were just different countries. So based on that, we were able, as I said, to go on our sample days and then record what was happening. Or rather ask the farmer to put the GoPro and record what they were doing. So this is a sort of labor profile we ended up with. So this one don't show lambing. The lambing one are a slide after. So you can see on that first one that was in the UK, the comparison was using an EID system, so going through a wake rate, much faster, or using a manual shedding for the animal. And you can see that at mating there is not much difference, but the big post, the big time when the labor is the most important is marking, shearing, weaning, and post-weaning and sales. And when we calculated that per 100 user differences between using an EID system and not using it, you could save up to 25 hours on a 100 ewe flock. So again, in that project, we were trying to time what happened if you do something compared to something else. But it's interesting to see that obviously marking, shearing, weaning are really the important time in terms of labor demand on these sorts of flock. We did the same thing with recording or not, so using an EBV system. And in that case, it was taking more time, and again, that seems logical, more time to just record your animal. And obviously marking was a time when you spend more time because you're trying to tag your animal and try to match them with their mother, which is why we had a 9 hours difference when we were comparing both systems. Otherwise, the rest of the activities were more or less the same. And finally, and that was really for the Irish farm, these ones, there was hardly any difference. When you look at all of the activities, it was only 1 hour difference between having a prolific or non-prolific breed. The main difference for the Irish was really at lambing time, and you'll see that in the next slide. So this is what we got for the lambing results. So you can see for the UK, when we were looking at a system where we were recording the lamb at birth or not. And again, even if we were spending more time dealing with the lamb, because as you can see on the picture, we're weighing or tagging, you still spend a lot of time driving and walking. And that's the same story that we saw in these 3 other farms at the beginning of my presentation. And for Ireland, there was more things happening with the lamb in the prolific system. Obviously, the farmer would spend more time trying to make sure the lamb are just still healthy and not dying. While in the non-prolific, interestingly enough, it was more spending time with the ewe compared to the prolific one. So again, just to give some ideas of how the system are. You can see in that system that driving was not much, but their system at lambing time in Ireland are more indoor compared to ours, which are more outdoor. So that's why they spend more time walking but less driving compared to what we were doing in Scotland at the time. So again, it's just to show you there is a lot of differences between the different system, but already we can start to pick up point where most of the labor is occurring. And if you're interested, there is some paper and publication we wrote about it in greater detail. So can we measure labor on a farm? We found it quite hard to measure. We were able to do it because it was research project. We had staff and students to help us. And it's highly seasonal and it depends on the system, as you've seen. But if you can use simple system like a GoPro or even an app on your phone to see where you've been during the day, it can give you some insight as to where there are places where you can optimize what you're doing or maybe change your system. For example, the 3 farmers who were in that first research I was showing you, when they saw how much time they were spending on their opening and closing the gate, and it was also linked to the electric fence, they decided to invest on a system in front of their quad bike, which allowed them to go over the fence, and so without having to get down and open it. So little change might just help you and make your life a bit easier. So as I say, can you change your system to optimize your labor? And you can get some relatively easy tool to benchmark yourself. As I say, GoPro maybe are not as much in fashion as they were 10 years ago, but something simple like a little camera or even an app on your phone, just to get some ideas of what you're doing. So that's it. We were measuring labor, but now I want to spend the last part of that talk to just present you some of the tools that we found in other so what kind of tool have we got and do they work really? So based on that, it's mostly work we've done under 20 on Horizon Europe and some of the government, Scottish government project. So one project we had was called, as Hazel was saying earlier, was called Small Ruminant Technology, where we were trying to find out issues for small ruminant farmer and how technology could help them. And it's finished last year. And this one, DG Rangeland, is one that we just started this year, looking at innovation for specifically rangeland system. So in these 2 projects, we were able to identify many tools or innovation that are useful for a small ruminant farmer. And we were able to do cost-benefit analysis and some guideline on how to use this tool. I'm not going to show you all of them, but I will focus on some of them that were specifically useful for time saving and better labor organization. But if you're interested, all the guideline and most of the one I'm going to show now are on a Zenodo. So you've got the link here, and it's a PDF. There is 30 guidelines in total. They're in English, but you can have them in other languages if you fancy it. So first of all, I wanted to maybe have a little chat about tools that you can have inside your shed. So the first one is really using these EID antenna and wake rate or auto sorter on handheld reader. And as I was saying earlier, they are quite helpful into saving time. Once you know how they work and you're quite happy using them, when we were looking at calculation when we were at Kirkton, we were able to weigh 500 ewes in 1 hour with one person instead of spending 2 days with 6 of us. And when I was doing some work based on some of the profile I was showing you earlier and putting number on it, that kind of worked out as roughly £4 per ewe per year in terms of saving specifically for labor. It doesn't sound that much, but when you scale it up to 800 or 1,000 sheep, that start to make interesting savings. And the the wake rate in that example is quite expensive. You can see the cost can be from 5 grand to nearly 14 grand if you've got an auto sorter like we do have at Kirkton. But once you start looking at the saving, then I was doing some calculation on return of investment, and if you had a 900 ewe flock and you buy a crate that's maybe £10,000, you could probably pay it back in 4 or 5 years based on these savings. So it is an investment, but it is not something that you will never recoup your time or your money. So that's just to put it there as something quite interesting. But you don't have to go with a whole singing and dancing wake rate, even using a stick reader to just record your animal when they go in the lorry for the abattoir or when they move from one place to another, or even when you're treating them. So just using something like that can save time. And the setup cost for this stick reader are between 800 and £2,000, depending on what kind of fancy system you're using. So that's the first tool I wanted to mention, something that's useful if you're inside the shed. And again, there is some publication we've done that detail in far more than what I've just said, if you're interested. What we found as well in this project was tools like a camera for lambing or even anything. So camera you put in your shed, and the farmer we were talking to in this project were quite keen on that one. The setup costs are not that much, between £800 and again £2,000 roughly. But what they thought was useful is it gives you real-time information. You can have it fed onto your laptop, a tablet, or your smartphone if you've got the right. Some of these cameras allow for motion detection. You can record the noise as well. Um, and then if you're really, really fancy, you can have infrared night vision and the soundtrack. So, and I would say some of the visit we've done during this project, we went to Norway and they had a very, very detailed and high-tech camera that they use in their shed, and you could read the tag number of the animal. That it was not pixelized or anything. So some of them are really good, and you can have up to 50 meter square coverage area, so that's quite good for your shed. So that's something we thought was quite useful, and it will save you time. You don't have to go and check all the time what's happening. You just look on your phone first to see if it's worth you more. So again, something useful. The second one I wanted to mention is the conveyor. It's something we do have at Kirkton as well. This is a picture here when it was all brand new and very clean. The advantage, it saves time when you're handling the animal, especially around treatment time. And I think the main thing that really was important to mention is it reduces the physicality of all the tasks. You can turn the sheep upside down and you don't have to be quite muscly or anything to do it. And you avoid having the issue of doing your back, for example. And what's useful, especially if you've got a large flock, is you can do multiple treatment at once if you've got more than one person to help you. So you can dose the sheep in the front while you vaccinate the one in the back. And because I'm not moving, you can be sure that the treatment is done properly, that you've done all of them, and you don't have to go back again and making sure that one of them has been spitting the treatment you've just given them. So again, the setup costs are quite pricey. It depends what system you've got, but it's something that will really help you on your farm. And that's something we found at Kirkton was extremely useful. Then when you're outdoor, there are different things that are quite helpful. So the first one is, how can you find your sheep when they're on a hill or in a glen? So one tool I wanted to present is a drone. More and more farmers are using it. As they found that it was saving them time and effort of checking the animal. You can see what's going on, and especially for gathering. So you can know in advance where they are roughly before you set up on foot or with your quad bike. And you can also inspect fence that are quite difficult to access. The costs vary. You can have a very basic one between 600, 700 pounds, or up to 6,000 pounds if you want really something like on the picture on the corner here. You can see it's an infrared camera. So obviously this one are a bit more pricey. There are limitations on the height to which you can fly them. It depends on the country. So I think in the UK there is some specific rules, and also the distance. You are supposed to be able to have line of sight, which is not always easy if you're on a hill. And also, I should say, if it's too windy, it doesn't work, and if it's too wet, it doesn't work. So that might restrict some of the use in Scotland, but still, it's something that more and more farmers are using, and yeah, it is quite a game changer in terms of what you do. Second tool is a GPS collar. It's a bit of something that's coming more and more in the forefront of sheep farming. The farmer who use them were mostly the one in Norway when we discuss in this EU project, but also in Iceland they use it. And we had a discussion last week. We're in Romania for another project, and the French farmer were telling us they start using GPS collar on their animal. They don't put the collar on all of the animals. They maybe buy 10, 15 collar for a 800 flock, but they put them on some of the key animal, and that allows them to know roughly where the rest of the flock is, if they know that some of them are in different area. So again, it helps time when you gather your animal. It can help you with supervision because you know roughly where they are. And some system will give you some alert. I think it's one of the Norwegian system. If the collar stop moving, then you get an alert saying might be dead somewhere or not. So the costs vary a lot. 50, I think, is very generous. I think it's more £200 per collar, so it's not cheap. You generally need a subscription and have a proper network coverage, so that can be a big issue. In our case, we use a digit animal, that's a photo on the corner there, and we use a LoRaWAN network because we don't have phone coverage. Some other farmer I was discussing with the French one last week, they use relay antenna for Sigfox. So there is different system, but it's something that's more and more, I think, farmers are thinking into investing because it really saves time when you're trying to gather and get your animal. Then, as well as finding them, there are other tools for outdoor. So the first one is the virtual fence. I think a lot of people are aware of that one. It saves time and cost of putting up the fence. So the idea is basically each animal has a collar, and you can set up a virtual boundary on your phone. And when the animal are going towards the boundary, you get a little warning sound, and then they get an electric pulse if they reach the boundary, so they go back. So it allows you not to have to put up fence, especially in area where you can't fence. It allows you to maybe have access to better grazing area or safer grazing area. But you can also have some idea of where your animal is moving. And again, you get some alert if the animal leaves the area. So again, it gives you that extra information that can make your labor easier. As I say, the costs are quite expensive at the moment. It's roughly £200 per collar, plus the subscription cost, which varies according to the company. You need a smartphone and you need mobile coverage. There are two companies in Norway, but we were discussing with colleagues recently, I think more and more, it's something that the industry is trying to invest and make it more accessible. The problem with virtual fence, especially for the sheep, is here you've got an example with goats, but all animals need to have the collar. So you really need it can be a big investment. But it's something I just mentioned because it would be silly not to talk about it. Something else about fencing as well. It's something that the French use, and I'm sure it's used in the UK as well. It's a connected fence. So it's this kind of little box that you attach to your fence, and it just allows you to monitor what's happening with your fence. If you get a break in your fence, then you'll get an alert on your phone, on your mobile phone, telling you go and check that. Instead of having to walk the fence, you know exactly, you can pinpoint where the issue is. That example is just not very expensive to set it up, to buy the kit, and you get a monthly subscription. So again, it's something that's quite interesting, I think, in terms of tool to help you with labor when you're outside. And finally, a couple of more tools that we discussed when we were doing the project. The first one is a phone application. It's a software really that helps you to rationalize your labor use. So a little bit of what we were doing earlier with our GoPro. This one is an app, and then you put it on when you start your work in the morning, and then you switch it off at the end. And during the day, it tracks where you are and what you're doing. So it gives you a nice visualization of what you're doing and is able to calculate your profitability. I'm sure you have to put some variable in it to make sure that what you're getting is interesting. And you're getting, you can see on the picture, a kind of a labor profile like I was showing you earlier. It's a French app at the moment. I don't think it's translated, but it's something that I'm sure the industry would be interested in. Probably in the UK, something like that would be developed. At the moment, it was just an annual subscription. So again, something that's quite interesting. And then finally, again, after discussing with more farmers last week in this other project, some of them were saying that they tend to use 3D maps to look at gathering route before they go anywhere. And that allows them to discuss with the other shepherd or gatherer, and you know exactly where you're going. So you're not losing time trying to find out where you are, etc. So this sort of more and more tool on phone seems to be getting more and more popular, at least interesting for the industry. So to conclude, measuring labor is useful if you want to benchmark yourself or benchmark against other farms, but it's more yourself really. There are ways and places in the sheep year where you can make some savings, as I was showing earlier, and there are tools out there. Some of them are more expensive than others, but it's really whatever takes your fancy. It can be simple, like an app on your phone, or something more complex, like a drone or a GPS collar. But I would say time is money, so try to optimize your time. So that's me, and we'll see if we've got any questions. So I just want to thank everyone. So obviously all the project and the funder for all the various results I showed you, Fass and Hazel for asking me to come tonight, and a colleague at Kirkton, and of course all the students who slaved over these videos. And before I conclude and we go on to the question, I wanted to mention in the context of that project DG Rangeland, we are trying to look at challenges and issues of farmer using tools like the one I've presented. So if you are interested and if you've got 15 minutes to spare, I would be very grateful if you could just click on that, well, look at that QR code or click on it. I think I've put the URL, and I think Hazel will put the link in the chat. So we're needing as many answers as we can.
Sort of my key takeaway messages from Claire's presentation. So I think the key takeaway messages would be to review your labour hours spent on tasks within your system. So whether that is, downloading an app and doing it, Strava, etc., simply jotting down in the notes in your phone or a diary, every day, what's taking you time. If you're sitting here tonight thinking, oh, actually, I've never thought about how long I spend opening and shutting gates or how long I spend driving about the farm, maybe start taking me notes of that over the next few weeks. Here we are at Tupping time where we're back into checking stock quite a lot. So it'll start being useful to just start thinking about that. And as we head into the new year and into lambing, once you've identified maybe what the long tasks are, look at what technology could help you save time there. And I think one thing that we've not really is sort of followed through in the theme tonight, but look at other farms and similar systems for comparisons. I mean, wouldn't you agree, Claire, all the projects that you're working on, you're seeing a lot of different systems. Yeah. And I think sometimes that's what we don't do enough of, is going and having a look at other people's systems, just to see what they're doing, and is there one or two little tips that you could pick up from somebody else.
Yeah.
Whether that's going to monitor farm meetings or getting yourself in a local farmer group, it's really useful to get out and about and see what other people are doing. Would you agree with those takeaway messages, Claire?
Totally, yeah. No, I think that's very, very good summarize point of what I've been saying. And to look at this other farm, we in that smart project, we've got a YouTube channel as well, and we've got lots of videos of how different countries have used different tools, and it should be all subtitled in English, so even if you don't fluent in Hungarian, you can still understand. But even that, they're very short, they're less than 2 minutes each, so it just shows you, as you say, Hazel, how other countries are doing things. And I think for us, probably Norway is probably maybe the most interesting, because the system are very similar. It's just the scale is different. There is more snow. But yeah, anyway, it's just looking at other things is always good.
Yeah, thinking outside the box. Brilliant. Okie doke. So that has drawn our evening to a close. So Claire just introduced the next webinar, really, really timely there. So we are back for part 3 on the 16th of December. And this one is called Taking Action. So this one's all about mindsets, and changing mindsets and attitudes, and having a look at how we're really going to take what we've learned in the last 2 webinars and physically put that into practice and drive change within our businesses. We've got 2 really good speakers again for that webinar, so we'd love to see you back on the 16th of December.